woman to represent the volunteer state in the U.S. Senate. Last year, Republican Senator Corker announced he would not seek re-election. The president is rallying his supporters in Pennsylvania as he pushes for them to elect Republican candidates in the November election. Trump said Republican nominee for Governor Scott Wagner was tough and smart. A top forensic expert says remains turned over by North Korea appear to be Americans. At the Pentagon today, Dr. John Bird said the bones appear to be from the Korean War era. He also said the North Koreans did an excellent job of preparing the remains for shipment to Hawaii.
It was very well done in terms of the way they packaged the material to transport it and then hand over to us.
Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee say a massive number of documents on Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh are being made available for review.
At the Capitol, Iowa Republican Chuck Grassley said the documents should be more than enough to satisfy Democrats.
It's probably the deepest dive we've had into the background of any previous Supreme Court nominee.
Grassley said many Democrats have already announced they will oppose Kavanaugh.
So I question the sincerity of demands for more documents. In other words, what more do they need to know to vote no?
Grassley chairs the Judiciary Committee and aims to hold confirmation hearings for Kavanaugh in September. I'm Terry Moore, NBC News Radio.
A company in California is reportedly behind the tainted salad mixes that caused at least 286 McDonald's customers to become sick. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration said Salinas-based Fresh Express was the supplier of the bagged salads tainted with cyclospora parasites. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio.
From the KCAA Weather Center, I'm Rod Williams for tonight. Mostly clear. An overnight low of 69. Friday, sunny and hot with a high of 98. Variable winds at 10 miles an hour. Clear Friday night with an overnight low of 74 degrees. I'm Rod Williams, broadcasting live from the Tri-City Center at the 10 and 210 freeways. We are the trifecta of talk in Southern California. KCAA 102.3 FM Riverside, 106.5 FM Redlands, and The Legacy, 1050 AM Loma Linda and San Bernardino.
Are you having trouble sleeping? Are you always tired and worn out? Is it affecting your work and personal life? Well, South Pacific Sleep Lab can help you out. South Pacific Sleep Lab provides a personal study of your sleep patterns. With their trained specialists, they will diagnose your sleep habits and will give you a prognosis for getting a great relaxing night of sleep. South Pacific Sleep Lab has locations throughout Southern California, including Fontana, and will provide transportation to any of their locations at no cost to you. To find out more, give them a call at 844-SAD-5050. That's 844-SAD-5050. South Pacific Sleep Lab. Start resting easy and sleeping sound today.
Attention all business owners, join See's Candies, Big Lots, Dollar Tree, and the Spunky Steer at the Tri-City Shopping Center in Redlands. Availability is now open for restaurants, retail, and more. Located between Alabama and the Tennessee exits where the 10 and the 210 meet, your company can be a part of over 60 retail shops, restaurants, and local businesses. The Tri-City Shopping Center is zoned for multi-use, so call today and schedule an appointment. Ask for Chris Beauchamp or John Jennings, 951-684-4400. The Tri-City Shopping Center in Redlands. The mall with a heart.
KCAA.
Are you ready for a new experience? To see life from another point of view? New hope, new expression, new joy. This is your radio hour. Welcome to Viewpoint with Father John.
And welcome, friends. You are tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at KCAA Radio. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reed. By the way, you can follow us on Facebook at Viewpoint with Father John. All of God's children are endowed with extraordinary purpose and ability. I am on a quest to help as many as possible in fully realizing their divinely inspired potential. Disposing of false narrative and embracing genuineness inspires clarity of purpose. My role is to help overcome self-imposed limitations in realizing one's spiritual potential. And this is a listener-supported program, so I would like to invite you to go to the show website, www.viewpointwithfatherjohn.com. Go to the support button, click on that and you can help keep us on the air. And I want to thank everyone who's been contributing to this program. It's because of you that we get to share this time together. On a personal level, I want to ask you to continue your prayer work for the people in Idlewild. The fires are still spreading, and also in Northern California, we still have some fires that are starting to merge, and it's really something else. Please pray for the emergency first responders who are really putting their lives on the line for us, for the people who need rescuing, and to try to save as many structures as possible. Tonight I'm really excited. I have a good friend with me tonight, Father Barrett Van Buren, just like the city, or not the city, the street, and I guess a president or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, we're supposedly related.
Yeah, so that'd be presidential. And he's an Episcopalian priest. He's of local status in Rialto at St. Peter's. And so please introduce yourself to our listeners.
All right. Well, thank you, Father John. I am Father Barrett Van Buren, and I am working as an associate priest over at St. Peter's in Rialto. And along with that, I've also served locally for over 4 years as a clinical chaplain in a local hospital setting, and have been involved for several years in ministry in various aspects. I am a board-certified chaplain currently and involved in all ages and all types of people.
Well, that goes right into what it is I want to talk about tonight, which is clinical pastoral care, which that is a real title. It's a real certification, and it's a very important one, because I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding of what chaplaincy is. Chaplaincy is not going in and converting people, but bringing spiritual comfort and care. So tonight we're going to be talking on some different levels. We're going to talk about the difference between palliative care and hospice care. We're going to talk about the role of the counselor for not just the patient, but the family. To help you give you a little idea of what is clinical chaplaincy. And so you're currently, now are you still with Pomona Valley Hospital?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm now working as a parish priest.
Very good. Well, you and I both spent a little time at Pomona Valley Hospital, and not just as patients. So I used to work on the alcoholism unit there back in 82 and 83. Mainly as a counselor, not much as a patient, but I was willing to drink to that. And so let's talk. What is CPE?
Well, CPE is Clinical Pastoral Education, and where that all starts is right from your first day of people who are wanting to get into chaplaincy work. You have to go through CPE, and you learn the whole dynamics of working with the patients, working with the hospital setting, understanding the staff, and being able to work the day-in-day workings of, for me, a medical center.
Now, do you have to be Christian to be a chaplain?
Absolutely not. In fact, you need to know that it's a very inclusive group, and we need to be inclusive in order to work with the different types of people that we work with on a daily basis. All different types of religions, multicultural, ethnic backgrounds, as well as different religions. We need to be sensitive to those issues, and so everyone is welcome to get into CPE if they definitely are approved.
Fantastic. And now my experience, as I served as a hospice chaplain for a while, is that what we used to say is when we go into the patient's home, we check our religion at the door, and we're there to meet them at their level. Has that been your experience?
Oh, that's correct. That's absolutely correct. Every single room that we go to, we have to go in there with no agenda,
right?
No desire at all, Father John. We need to go in there and accept the people right where they are at, being able to have that compassion and being able to understand them. In fact, one person says you almost have to come in being agnostic, where you open up your theology and expand that to just being present.
I like that concept, being present. We were talking at dinner, some of the experiences we've had in pastoral care on the chaplain side of that. And I find when I was doing it, the greatest gift I could bring was an open mind, my full attention, and a loving heart.
Mm-hmm.
And if any of those are missing, it's like a three-legged stool. If you miss any of those three elements, you can't balance it correctly.
That's right. And in fact, that's what we're doing when we come in. We are a part of a whole holistic approach where we're finding that balance in helping in that curative process, physically, spiritually, and mentally and socially. You know.
Good. Now, a lot of people don't understand that there's a difference between palliative care and hospice care. Can you help the listeners understand a little bit what the difference of these two topics are?
Well, sure. First of all, when you're talking about palliative care, palliative, you have to start off with that word, and it's from Latin, which means to soothe, means protection, or to cover. And that's what the purpose is for palliative care, to be able to work with patients no matter their trajectory in their illness. You could have a patient right at the very beginning stages of cancer, and that they need to have pain and symptom management.
Right.
It is a process of learning about quality of life for all of us working together, because palliative care has an interdisciplinary team.
Right.
And this interdisciplinary team is a nurse, registered nurse. You're talking about a physician. You're talking about also a social worker. And then you're talking about a clinical chaplain.
And also a home health aide.
That's definitely the case also for in transition.
Sure.
If they're going into also hospice eventually, yeah.
Reason I mentioned that is one of the listeners is a dear friend of mine, Linda Love, who we went to high school together and then wound up working together at Hospice of the Valleys, and she's one of the best home health aides I'd ever seen to this day. She really loved on patients, and she was also a certified massage therapist, so she was licensed to do that. And so there were some times that she'd go in, and that was the prescribed treatment to help bring comfort. And she just had hands of magic. Just really, she was the hands of Jesus on these people of bringing them comfort. Anyhow, I interrupted you, so please continue.
Well, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because palliative care is involved in treatment. That's the difference between palliative care and hospice, because in palliative care, you're working with the doctors, you're working with the treatment and the process, so it's complementary with treatment. But in hospice, treatment has stopped.
Right.
And then you're talking about strictly where the patient is in the process of in the dying process.
Correct. And I found one of the things that's important with spiritual care is dealing with in-life issues, unresolved issues. And I worked with some wonderful spiritual care staff, and we all had an agreement on confidentiality with the patient. And even in our notes, we would give generalizations, but never specifics on what we talked about, so that it was like hearing a confession that they had total confidentiality. They didn't have to worry about the family knowing about what they had to say, or even other members of the staff. We say in a general way, they're dealing with some issues in this area, but never give specifics. This is what's going on. Now, is that the way you're trained as well?
That is correct. And we do work with everybody. We work with the surrogate. We work with the family members. We work with the loved ones. But we also need to be respectful to the confidentiality of the patient. In fact, we even take the time to do a spiritual assessment.
Right.
In order to find out more about the patient. Like, we ask questions to the patient, not only getting to know them personally, but finding out what's the most important relationship in their life, what or who helps them finding meaning and a sense of purpose, what helps them cope in difficult times, and do they consider themselves a spiritual or religious person? And
which is different. You gave me a wonderful definition at dinner between the two of them that Rabbi Shapiro gave you.
That's right.
Would you share it?
Sure. Rabbi Rami Shapiro had said that religion is finding rituals and meaning about God, but spirituality is finding how to be godly.
Absolutely.
And the best part of religion is when you can have a spiritual community.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting ready to come up to our first break. My guest tonight is Father Barrett Van Buren. He's a good friend of mine, and we will be coming back with this conversation in just a couple minutes.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
Every day is a great day at KCAA Radio. August 2nd is National Coloring Book Day. Coloring books have always been popular with children, but over the years, adults have gotten more and more involved with coloring. Adult coloring is now a huge trend, and many are finding that it is not only fun, but also a great way to reduce stress. Founded in 1941, Dover Publications led the way, releasing their first coloring book for adults, Antique Automobiles Coloring Book, in 1970. Dover now publishes Creative Haven, a popular line of coloring books specially designed for adult colorists. National Coloring Book Day was submitted by Dover Publications in May 2015. The registrar at National Day Calendar declared National Coloring Book Day to be observed annually on August 2nd. For KCAA NBC Radio, I'm Andrew Caravella, and this has been The More You Know.
Now, here's a new concept: digital network advertising, where businesses display your ad inside their building. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, your company is going to thrive with digital network advertising. Choose your marketing sites or jump on the DNA system and advertise with all participants. Your business ad or logo is rotated multiple times an hour inside local businesses where people will discover your company. Digital network advertising. DNA, a novel way to be seen and remembered. Digital network advertising with networks in Redlands and Yucaipa. Call in the 909 area 222-9293 for introductory pricing. That's 909-222-9293 for digital network advertising. One last time, digital network advertising, 909-222-9293.
And welcome back. You are tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. And this is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reed. My guest tonight is Father Barrett Van Buren. And we're talking about palliative care and hospice care. And what are some of the assessments we go through when we go into the hospital room or bedroom, because we do house calls That's one of the beautiful things about these two approaches to care for people is you don't have to be in a hospital for it. You can get house calls. So let's talk a little bit about your spiritual assessments and some of the questions that you like to ask.
Oh, sure. Once we asked those questions that we asked earlier, we also asked to what extent do we consider them self-religious? Is it moderate, slightly, or very? And then the spiritual religious practices that are important to them. We need to find that out. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of people don't realize that because we are multicultural, we have to be very sensitive.
Right.
And we even work with people that are atheists and agnostics.
Hard to believe.
A lot of people find that really challenging because they're wondering, well, how can, especially an Episcopal priest, how can you work with one that's agnostic or atheist? And again, our approach is to be right where they're at. And so we find out where they're coming from. And we ask questions to find out where they're coming from in regards to poetry, maybe, philosophy, rituals, music, meditation. Do they read scripture or sacred texts, prayer? Do they attend religious services? This one patient told me his favorite thing was watching sports every day. That's his religion, you know? So you just accept them right where they're at and get to know them in that aspect.
Well, I had a patient that said they were apathetic, agnostic. I says, what does that mean? He says, I don't know and I don't care.
Well, that's that, and you got to go right with them. You can't let that bother you in the least. And we also find out where they're coming from in regards to anticipatory grief, bereavement, and then we get into interventions.
Okay.
Now, those kinds of interventions that we work with is, first of all, we can facilitate contact with their faith community.
Good.
Which is generally the case, and in many of the cases, a lot of the patients had asked for us to contact their clergy. But then you have a lot of patients that haven't attended church or any worship center for many years. So you find out where they're coming from, and you find out also about what they where they're coming from, and really have that active listening.
Now, in that, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, do you also deal with them with family dynamics around the illness?
Absolutely. And the reason why that's important is because that's all part of the healing process. And that curative process where many times we had to take family and bring them separately to be able to go through consultation to explain where the patient is at, for them going through their own grieving. Absolutely. And then being able to be prepared to come together as a family. We want to definitely work with them in every aspect to help them, and that's every day was a new and different experience in working with people.
Now, do you have any stories that stand out particularly that are some of your favorite experiences working as a chaplain?
Oh, thank you. Father John, one experience I will never forget is when I worked with this one patient that was in her process of dying, and her priest came and gave her last rites, but left afterwards. And I was all by myself in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes ahead and she looks at me and she says, "Oh, look at that, they're here." And I'm going, "Who's here?" This was my first 3 months in CP.
Still on probation, yeah.
And I said, "Well, tell me, who do you see?" She says, "I see my family. I see all the different people around, and they're all around the bed, and they're coming to greet me."
Yes.
And I was like, I was all by myself. I was like going, oh, wow. And I said, well, tell me about it. And she shared her experience and her moment of joy. And then, like, within 30 minutes, she transitioned. And
you know, that reminds me of my very first experience. I was working at Pomona Valley Hospital. I was on the alcoholism unit. I was a night counselor. So in addition to doing emergency counseling in the emergency room, I also handled the 5150s, which is 72-hour holds against your will for evaluation. But one night I was working, and this family came up, and they literally threw their dad through the sliding doors that would open, and said, "Call us when he's dead," because he was actively dying. A lot of resentment. So my job, because he was alcoholic, they brought him up to 2 West. That's where the unit was at the time. And my job was to sit with him through the entire process. Now, I was just a young punk kid in school. I'm just starting my education vita to get something going here. So as he's going through the different processes, he turns to me and he says, I'm at the gates, but Jesus says I can't go in. And without thinking, I said, well, it's not quite time yet. Where that came from, I don't know. It had to be the Holy Spirit. So then he went through the entire night doing the life review, talking about what he saw. Father Barrett, the only thing he saw was the loving parts, nothing else. And then about 10 minutes before I was supposed to go off duty, he turned to me. He says, "You've been very kind to me. Jesus says I can come in now. Thank you." And he closed his eyes, and that was it. I bawled like a baby.
Oh, I bet.
And that was my very first experience. And here I am, a young kid just starting my process towards priesthood. What an impact that had on me.
Oh, and here you're talking about the Christian aspect, both of us, but how about the multicultural aspects?
Right.
Oh, this is just so incredible, an experience that happened to me where I was inside ICU, and this Vietnamese Buddhist family said, "Our uncle is dying. You need to find a Vietnamese Buddhist monk and a priest." And I said, "Oh, great. Okay, let me see what I can do." Well, I got in contact with my connections with the Buddhist temple that we had a strong partnership with, and they connected me. We ended up getting about 5 or 6 of the monks coming in, and they had me join with them with the bells that they had with their hands, being able to go with the heartbeat of the patient. And they were starting fast and slow, and then it was getting faster, and then it was getting slower, stop. And there was that sacred peace that just happened at that moment. And it was so incredible to be involved with all those people at that time in this type of transition that was most unique for me, and it was powerful.
Well, my theory is true spirituality touches everyone and is multicultural and multi-denominational and religious background, because I don't believe spirit knows a denomination. Now, that's just my opinion, but I'm right. Just in case anyone's wondering out there. Because if God could be limited to one faith, one denomination, one prayer group, God wouldn't be big enough to solve our problems.
That's right. And again, it is not our job to proselytize whatsoever.
Right.
We are there to be right where the people are at. And that includes like even the chanting box I remember you mentioning at dinner. Those wonderful chanting boxes that you put at the bedside.
For the Buddhist patients.
The Buddhist patients. And we worked with Islam. We worked with Sikh. We worked with Hindu. We worked with all the different religions and the most wonderful and gracious people. And being right there, you learn so much about people themselves.
Well, it reminds me of two things that St. Francis would say, and I think you've heard me say this in the past. I know they've heard it on the show, that St. Francis of Assisi told his friars, if when you're walking you find even a corner a piece of the Quran, you were to pick it up, you were to kiss it, and you were to place it on the altar, because it too is a search for God. Mm. And the other thing he is credited with saying that touches me deeply is, go out and preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words.
That's right. That's right.
And it's our actions that say everything. And my experience as a chaplain was they weren't so much interested in what I had to say. They were more interested in my ability to listen. Mm-hmm. And I've had the privilege of being with people their very last moment. I've had a number of patients ask me to hold them during their last moments. Mm-hmm. And it was such a sacred moment. And I've had that from people of all different religious backgrounds. And one of them said the reason he would call me father was because he felt I loved him like he was my son. Oh, wow. His name was Ray. And a little story on Ray. Ray had throat cancer. And for about 3 years, he couldn't taste anything. And I discovered in my spiritual assessment of him, my evaluation, that he was really into barbecuing and had all these marinade recipes. I mean, that really was his bliss. And I love to barbecue. So we were exchanging recipes. So I got with his wife and the other members of the interdisciplinary team. I said, why don't we throw a barbecue for Ray? We'll all chip in so it doesn't cost the family anything if everyone's open to that. We'll use one of his recipes for the marinade. And he could invite anybody he wants. So he invited all of his children, his nieces and nephews. There's about 30 people there. And we kicked in, got some tri-tip, and we used Ray's recipe. Well, Ray's eating, and I'm sitting across the room from him, and I see tears coming down his face. I said, Ray, what is it? And it still chokes me up. He says, Father, for the first time in 3 years, I can taste, and it's so delicious. Oh. To me, that was pure spiritual care. Bringing a moment of bliss to someone who hasn't had a moment of bliss in so long. He wasn't interested in how smart I was, how many years of seminary I had. He was interested in the fact that as a team, we loved him enough to do this. And we truly made his life a celebration before he died, in addition to the celebration we had for him after he died. So it sounds like those are sort of paths that you're explaining as you're talking about your experience in caring for people.
Well, compassion is so important, and empathy. You have to be careful, though, don't you?
Yes.
That you can get into a situation of that transference and the countertransference. Yes. And countertransference, where I remember, I'll never forget as long as I live, where I was in the room, in the emergency room, and there was a child that was my son's age, and he happened to be named after my son, the same name as my son, and looked very similar to my son, and the family was told that he was brain dead because of a motorcycle accident. And here the family, the husband and wife, the mother and father, just cried so, the agony that was in that room. And it was so difficult. I had to leave at that point in order to get myself back on track. And it, so when you get into these situations, you have to be really careful about the countertransference.
Well, I think sometimes people forget that we're human beings walking in here.
Yes.
That means we have our own emotions, we have our own things that we're going through during our day, and we're trying to put enough of that aside that we can be present for those who are in need of what we're there to do. But that doesn't mean we don't have feelings.
Right.
And sometimes what I've found can be difficult is manipulation that can take place as well. Sometimes the family want their loved one to go out a certain way, and they want to convince the family, and so they see guys like you and I wearing collars, and they say, well, you got to talk them into this. And that's not what spiritual care is.
That's funny you bring that up, because a lot of times in our hospital, we had to make sure to even take these collars off. We like the Roman collars; they come off real quick.
I just in my mind, I just saw a religious strip tease. Okay.
Well, a lot of times, because this sometimes stands for something completely opposite than you wish it did for some people.
It can, and one of the things that saddens me in some of the religious world is when people try to say one church is going but another isn't. And we have to deal with that because there is prejudice. Before we go to our next commercial break, I'm going to share with you the story of Hank. Hank's an old Irishman. This is in Ireland. And Hank's dying. He says to his son, boy, he's been Irish Catholic his entire life. Boy, go get the Protestant minister. I'm dying. I'm going to convert. Father, we've been Catholic all of our lives. What do you mean you're going to convert? He says, I don't have time to argue. Go. So the boy goes and he gets the Protestant minister, and on his way back, he stops at the Catholic church and he says, Father, Dad, he's converting. He's dying. He's converting to being a Protestant. He says, don't worry, boy. I'm on my way. So the priest takes off over to Hank's house, and as he gets in to the front door, here comes the Protestant minister down the staircase. He says, oh, it's too late, Father. He's one of ours now. He's one of ours. And so the priest goes up and says, Hank, I don't understand. You've been a Catholic all your life. You're dying and you convert? He says, oh, Father, it makes perfect sense. Somebody's going to die. Better one of theirs than one of ours. And so with that, we'll go to our commercial break, and we'll be back in a couple minutes.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
This segment of programming sponsored by Cybertime Network Communications. How's your internet? Slower than what you were paying for? Feeling boxed in with the high cost of the internet? It can be frustrating and expensive, and with net neutrality coming, it's not getting any easier. Ready for a better high-speed internet service? Then you're ready for Cybertime. And they're local and right in your own backyard. Cybertime provides connectivity for all our transmissions you're listening to at KCAA. Cybertime is locally owned and will respond to your needs with the best service. It's crisp, cool, fast, and sleek. Cybertime uses the latest, leading-edge microwave technology to be able to offer clients a safe, reliable, public or private network that fits almost any budget size. Numerous local city agencies rely on Cybertime's microwave private network for their most critical mission applications. You should too. Get connected, stay connected, get smart, get Cybertime. You can Google, text, or call Cybertime Network Communications at 909-795-9559. Cybertime Network Communications in Calamasa.
I'm so tired of the buffering on my smartphone.
I'm so over it. Next.
Right? I am so over it. Next.
A radio? Next.
No buffering, just your favorite local radio station?
Next Radio uses the FM tuner that is already built into your phone, so you can listen to your favorite stations on the go. Because Next Radio uses the FM tuner already built into your smartphone, it saves on data and battery usage. When compared to streaming audio, Next Radio uses less than 1/10 of your data, and your battery will last 3 times longer. Next Radio, it's FM radio on your smartphone.
Introducing a radio inside your cell phone. Listen to all kinds of local radio stations, including KCAA 106.5 Yucaipa and 102.3 Riverside on Next Radio. Download the free Next Radio app today. 100% free, 100% fun, 0% buffering. Stop the buffer and listen to KCAA.
And welcome back. You are tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reed, along with Father Barrett Van Buren, who's been a wonderful guest so far tonight. Also, I want to send a special thanks to Nick, who's our board operator tonight. Nick, you're doing a great job. Thank you. I see you got a haircut since last week. Well, wait a second. Or did you get a new razor? You're bald.
New razor. Brand new razor. Just for you.
We used to go to the same barber. His name was Bick. And
My barber's Gillette.
Gillette.
Yes.
Oh, I see that you're expanding. That's good.
Yeah. Well, with the new job, I can afford the 5 razors. So
That's good. That's good. And I'm going to leave that alone. Thank you very much. And, of course, our number one producer, my beautiful wife, Gabby, thank you for being here. And Father Barrett, thank you for being here. Absolutely. And we're talking tonight about palliative care, also hospice care, which are two different things. You are still receiving treatment with palliative care. With hospice care, is simply spiritual, emotional, and physical comfort while you're transitioning from this life to whatever is after it.
That's right.
And so we're having some great conversations, sharing some experiences we have. Now, I have to tell you, my former superior was in CPE with Jerry Davis out at Loma Linda. And while he was doing his rounds, he had come across this patient who was in a room dying of AIDS. And there was a evangelical type minister in there in his room telling him how he was going to go to hell, but he should come to Jesus anyhow, which is kind of a mixed message. And my former superior was so enraged, he went in the room, physically picked the guy up, took him out, put him up against the wall, says, "You are never coming to this room again. If I ever see you, I will personally kick your butt," and kicked him out of the hospital. He went back and said, "Son, let's talk, because God doesn't have stepchildren, and God loves you. He doesn't care about if you're gay or straight. He didn't give you AIDS, so let's talk."
Wow.
And that was a powerful thing. I mean, that really hit me deep when I learned about that. And now, keep in mind, my former superior was a very large Lebanese man. He could pick a lot of people up.
Wow. Well, you brought up a very valid point.
It's not chaplaincy.
Oh, no, not at all. And that can be so damaging in so many aspects in all accounts, for the chaplain to do that to the patient.
And it's like we have two different gods. We have the God when we're alive and the God that when we die. The one we're alive with, Jesus talks about being all love and forgive 70 times 7. But once you die, that's it. Now, somehow, in my little Irish heart, that just doesn't make sense. I have children. No matter what they do, I would never want to stop seeing them. And if I, who am a erring human being, love my children that greatly, how much greater is the love of God, who's the creator of all? And when I go into any room to visit somebody, that's the mindset I go in with, that we are all God's children.
That's right.
And, our children are all a little bit different. And so the idea is to learn how to appreciate our differences and also celebrate our similarities.
And remembering, just like what St. Paul said, nothing can separate us from the love of God.
That's right. Perfect quote. Thank you. So is there any other experiences that you've had that you'd like to share with us that really stand out in your heart?
Oh, well, there are so many different ones. I think one of the most incredible ones is when I had my physician that I worked with that was very hesitant about a chaplain even going into the room. And the reason is because the son was an atheist. And she wanted to be very sensitive and very caring about the whole situation. But the patient wanted to see a chaplain.
Right.
And so there was that real challenge at that point where finally it was allowed for the chaplain, for me to come in, be very brief, go and do what you need to do and leave as quickly as you can. Well, when I walked in, the atheist son was so moved when I came in to be with her. And he says, "Would you please pray for her? Would you please let her know how much I love her too?" And I said, "Well, you can say that right now too, you know." But I went ahead and followed that. And it ended up that he was so moved by the whole experience that he wanted me to help with the funeral. He wanted me to help with all the processes with the family and everything of working together. And it was just an example of how, you know, we think in one hand of how they're going to respond, and yet the love of God is right in that room, happening for all of them.
It reminds me of what you and I were talking about at dinner about Mother Teresa, when that reporter tried to trip her up saying, "Reverend Mother, don't you find it difficult coming to places like Calcutta and converting people to Christianity?" And when she said to the reporter, "My son, my job is not to convert people to Christianity. My job is to bring the love of Jesus Christ to them. And if by bringing the love of Jesus Christ to the Hindu, I made them a better Hindu, I've done my job. And if by bringing the love of Jesus Christ to the Buddhist, I made them a better Buddhist, I've done my job. My job is not to convert, but to love." And I think that's a powerful universal message. We've turned Christianity into such a tribal religion, which is not what it was set up to be. It was meant to be, you know, in the Eastern Orthodox, where I come from, our early fathers, father and mothers of the desert, believed that salvation was universal. It was the salvation of history. And later on, after Constantine got involved, and I'm not blaming Constantine for this, but after the only requirement to be a Christian was to be a Roman citizen, you're by birth now a Christian. I think the church went in a bad direction to find a way to keep people coming to church, and they went to the lowest denomination, which is fear, and which goes against the teachings of Jesus, as I understand the teachings of Jesus. I mean, I could be wrong, but my experience has been, in that first story I told about with that drunk who was thrown in the ER by his children, was his experience was about love. God wasn't throwing him away. God was reminding him that he was created with love. He simply forgot who he was. And so at that process, God, as I saw God, practiced his own rule of forgiveness 70 times 7.
That's right. Perfect love casts out all fear.
That's right. That's right. And so what would be some words of wisdom that you would give our listeners if they're needing to either seek palliative or hospice care? What are some notes that they should have?
Oh, thank you. Well, the most important thing is just to remember that when the words palliative care come up, that is not meaning a death sentence. It is talking about the opportunity for pain and symptom management, to work to have the patient have the quality of life that they deserve, and to be able to listen to the palliative care team, and for them to be allowed to listen to you and to the patient, and to work together, that great things can happen in the hospital. I saw so many examples of wonderful healing. People who even were in the dying process that totally turned around because of palliative care. It's amazing when that stress is relieved and pain is relieved, that healing can really begin.
Yes.
And that's what it's all about. And to be respectful to a palliative care team, because they are there for you. And so is the hospice team. And hospice is, an incredible program. I know it firsthand because my sister was in hospice for the last 4 months. This is an incredible story, but she turned totally around. They thought that she was in her dying process. She has now been taken off of hospice. She has now been put into a new facility, and she is now able to eat and drink and walk and talk, and it's just an incredible experience. We are having a wonderful time with her that we never thought was possible.
Oh, that's great. My sister passed a couple years ago. I had the privilege when it was time for her to go on hospice care to be able to explain the process. And that was a real privilege because her immediate family didn't really know what to do. And so she just called me up on the phone because they're out in Illinois, Troy, Illinois. And she just had me explain to everybody, this is how hospice works. And here are some of your benefits that you should be talking to your social worker about, your nurse about, your home health care person about, and your chaplain.
Yes. And she had, and isn't that the most important? Because that spiritual component for my sister.
Sure.
That was so powerful in the hospital as well as in hospice. That changed her.
Yes, and she wound up passing very peacefully. We had a nice celebration of life for her, and she got to go with dignity and knowing that she was surrounded with love.
Wow.
And I think that's so important because that really is the only gift we can really bring into them. I mean, it's nice that we can come in with music. I mean, that's important. It's nice that we can be there to answer questions. But if we show up without bringing love with us, we've totally taken away our entire purpose of being there. They don't care how smart we are. They don't care how much we memorize. They want to know. As a wise person once said, people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
That's right. And the chaplain took the time to be with all of you?
Yes.
Oh, that's great.
And it was really kind of neat because we can relate on the phone a little bit, and I can give them a little bit of history on my sister and some of where she comes from. She was a very metaphysical person, and so I was able to explain, what her path has been a little bit, in addition to her sharing as well. And the chaplain did a really good job. I was very pleased with what had happened, not just for my sister, for her family as well. And I think that's what a lot of people may not understand, is that the chaplain, the social worker, all of the team is for the whole family, because you're going to need help not just at the time of death, but afterwards.
That's right.
The 13 months of bereavement.
That's right, and you're absolutely correct. In fact, that's why at the hospital where I worked, chaplains were also involved in a bereavement program. After the patients were checked out, we had to call and follow up. We sent referral information. We sent cards to them. We let them know that we cared and if there's anything that we can do to help them.
Well, in hospice, I got to wear a lot of hats, including bereavement coordinator, and I brought him a lot of grief, believe me. And, I've been a assistant director or administrator for one hospice, and I got to set up another hospice for another group, which is funny because I go in there and a lot like what you do is I just want to be of service. I don't care about titles. I just want to know how can I best help. And that seems to be one of the greatest things you bring to the table, is you're there not for you. You're there to be, as St. Francis would say, an instrument of God's love and God's peace. And I thank you for that. As we're coming to our final minutes of the show, again, I want to thank Father Barrett for being here this evening. He's been a wonderful guest and for sharing all your wisdom with us.
You're so welcome.
And I hope you'll come back again.
Oh, absolutely, Father John. Thank you.
He has an official show cup now, so he's on the hook now. I explained to him that he is he's obligated for the next 2 weeks to carry that mug with him everywhere so he could say, I've been on Viewpoint with Father John, and that's a show that should get awards. From your lips to God's ears. And I want to thank Nick for doing a wonderful job behind the boards. You wouldn't be hearing me if it weren't for Nick. He's a good man. And, of course, the lady who keeps me in check, which is my beloved Gabby. She makes sure that I'm here and that I wear a clean shirt, because you don't want to have a dirty shirt on radio. She says, I have the right face for radio, but not necessarily the right shirt. And to you, my listeners, you know what? Especially the ones that have donated. Again, this is listener supported, so please go to www.viewpointwithfatherjohn.com. Click the support button and give what you can. If you give $1, that helps. Every bit of it goes to the show. I'm not making any money on this so far, but it keeps us on the air, and it brings me into your house. And for bringing me into your house, I'm really a grateful individual. We're making up a family here, and families don't always agree, but families always love. And so if no one's told you that they love you this week, let me be the first. And I hope that you'll tune in again next week. Tell your friends about this. Look for us on YouTube. We are on there as well. And send in your questions. I always love to hear from the listeners. But in the meantime, have a blessed week. God bless.
God bless.
Did you know that every dollar you put into a piece of real estate makes you money 5 ways? Cash flow, money in your pocket each month. Equity capture, the thousands of dollars you create when you have the right team and buy the right property using the right map.